What up, fam? Welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So every Saturday, my little social group and I have what we call Party Tuesday. Party Tuesday on a Saturday. I know, weird. But anyways, on these little gatherings, we often end up playing Dead by Daylight. Just something about hunting down your friends and murdering them mercilessly that is just, it's perfect. Anyways, I figured since we're having a little Halloween extravaganza all month, I figured it was the perfect excuse to use this technique that I've seen used on YouTube a lot and I've always wanted to try. And that is using paper mache to make a mask. And not just any mask, but the Dead by Daylight inspired Huntress Mask. I love this thing, and the technique I use to do it is super easy. I got it from a YouTube channel called Ultimate Paper Mache, where she just kind of goes over making all types of different art using this technique. I will link to her in the description below because without that help, I wouldn't have been able to do this. All right, before you start throwing axes at me, I'm just gonna get right to it and level up this skill. Making the armature. Now, as this is my very first foray into paper mache anything, there was a lot of stuff I kind of had to learn. The most basic of which is what is the bones of the whole paper mache thing, right? It turns out it's often made out of either cardboard or wired, and this is called the armature. I opted to make mine out of cardboard, so I went ahead and cut up these moving boxes just so I had enough material to work with. Also, and this is really important whenever you're trying to make something look like something else out there in the universe, make sure you have some solid reference art. Luckily, this can all easily be found on the internet at any point in time. I even found this really great image that I can use to kind of block out what pieces I needed. So in looking at it, I decided to make the cheeks into two separate pieces, and then the nose and forehead a single piece by themselves. And then of course, the ears will be on there too. Those are both two separate pieces. Now, because I wanted this to actually be able to fit my face, I needed to take some measurements. So I just busted out my handy dandy tape measure and measured from under my nose to the top of my head, where the eyes land kind of in between that space, the width of my face, and also the distance between my eyes. I used all those measurements to draw some lines on my cardboard as guides, and then sketched in my shape using the reference as a guide. So one of the things I really like about this show is how often skills or things you learn from other skills end up overlapping each other. So for example, in order for me to get this rounded shape so it could actually fit on my head, I needed to put in a dart. A technique that I first ran across when I was learning how to do some tailoring in earlier episodes. All this basically is kind of a wedge shape that you take out of a piece of material. So when you put the edges of those pieces together, it ends up making a different shape. In our case, this rounded shape here. With all that laid out on our cardboard, I carefully cut out the shape with a sharp razor knife. I also removed that triangular dart portion at this point as well. Once I had that all cut out, I went back to my piece of cardboard and drew in the cheek shapes where I thought they'd fit. And here's a point I want to emphasize that was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around because of how I am. This is a super forgiving process. I agonized over like the measurements of the cheeks and how to put them in. And in the end, I was just like, whatever, I'm gonna draw it in how it looks right and then cut it out and see how it works. If something doesn't work, you either cut some of it away or you tape on a little bit more cardboard. Not rocket science, shouldn't take forever. That being said, the closer you can get to kind of your finished shape and the contours you want and everything, the less work you have to do later on when we put on the material that we're gonna put over the top of it. With that in mind, once I had everything together, I realized that I wanted to cut the cheeks here in half. I just realized that having it in two pieces was gonna make it so that I can tape them back together at a different angle, making the angle of the cheeks here a little bit sharper. Again, super forgiving, so just kind of play with it and see what works. So as you notice so far, it looks like the shape I want, but everything's really flat. To fix this, we just go in and break the cardboard. This is just a process where you kind of knead it and fold it and you break up the little fibers inside of it, making it really malleable so you can shape it however you'd like. And as you can see here, once we connect the sides of that dart together, this dome shape is formed. A dome shape which fits my melon nicely. Happy with that, I also broke the cheeks in to make sure I can shape them well and figured out how I wanted them to be positioned. Once I had that planned out, I went ahead and taped them into place. And from here, it's actually starting to look kind of like my murder rabbit. And though it does fit, there's just a little too much space on the sides for me. But again, simple remedy. I just cut some strips of cardboard, broke them in, and then just taped them around the edges. Now everything's the right size and has the exact fit that I'm looking for. I wish everything worked this way. Can you imagine if I cut leather too small and I could just kind of duct tape some more on the sides and everyone's like, perfect, nice, good job there. And it's kind of cool because thanks to breaking the cardboard like we did, we're able to really shape things like the eyes and the cheeks just by kind of pushing on them and kneading at them. You can actually get a lot more forming out of it than I thought you'd be able to. Just to make everything a little bit more smooth, I added some tape to all the little transition points, helping to mellow those lines out a little bit. Alright, so with the face mask part of it looking pretty legit, it was time to move on to the most characteristic part of the whole thing, the ears. To get my proportions right, I referred back to my reference photo and discovered that the ears were pretty much exactly the same size as the face mask itself. Armed with that information, I positioned the mask onto some cardboard and drew in my ears with that measurement in mind. Once I cut them out, I realized they were going to be a little too thin and flimsy. So, like with the rest of the project, I just added more cardboard to it, using those ears as a template to trace exact copies of them, and then taping those two pieces together to make a thicker material to work with. I was also able to kind of push and form these to shape them to look a lot more like a rabbit's ear too. I've highly underestimated how much fun cardboard is to work with, actually. I'm gonna have to make some more stuff out of cardboard. I kind of liked it, honestly. Alright, so with my ears looking the right thickness and overall shape, I went ahead and cut slits in the mask where they should fit into. Then I slid the ears into place just to make sure everything looked correct. Once I was sure that was gonna work, I marked the depth on the ears and then took them back out. Now notice I didn't tape the bottom down here purposefully. This way I could take both pieces of cardboard here at the end and spread them apart, giving me more surface area to tape to. Then I just put them back in place, folded those pieces back over, and applied just a buttload of tape to make sure I kept them in place. And then I taped the outside as well. And here's the only thing that I wish I did differently on this mask. The tape inside and outside is doing a really good job holding the ears, like it's pretty strong. But I would have also liked to have put some sort of a wire up in here, just because the weight of the material we're gonna put on it afterwards just made them sag backwards like just a little bit. I'm nitpicking here because it still looks really good. I just wanted them a little bit more forward so it's like aggressive looking, right? Just bear that in mind. As fun as cardboard can be to work with, it's still cardboard. So once it gets a little bit moist, as it will get with this project, and it gets some weight on it, it might deform or move a little bit. But with the ears in place, this thing is already looking amazing. Albeit a little Iron Man-y with how flat the face is. Just kind of this straight hard surface right here. How dope would it be to make like a Dead by Daylight Iron Man mashup? She pushes a button, it's just like ears. I want to do that. To fix this little nose problem though, I simply cut out some more cardboard, roughly the nose shape, just a little bit smaller, and taped it into place. Then I cut out a third shape, just a little bit smaller than the last one, and taped it into place as well. Finally, I added just a little bit more masking tape just to smooth all of those rough edges over. And I love that! Even just as it sits right there, like that is the Huntress mask. Like it already looks like that characteristic shape, right? Alright, I'm geeking out far too much early. We haven't even gotten to the really fun bit yet. In fact, let's jump into that right now and learn how to make some paper clay. Okay, so I've seen a few different recipes on how to make this paper clay stuff. A lot of them have you take like scrap paper, like newspapers or whatever, and you chop them up in a blender and then you let them soak in water overnight before you add all the adhesives like glue and stuff to them and then use them on your project. The problem with that is it implies a level of patience I simply don't have. I just don't. So to cut the wait time from 24 hours to, I don't know, 10 minutes, I opted to use some toilet paper. And just so you don't think it's like a super inferior material to be using compared to the other things, the person who made up this recipe uses toilet paper too. And for the exact same reasons. I respect her, she's very impatient, just wants to get to making. Alright, here's how you make this stuff. First, I'm gonna unroll just a whole bunch of toilet paper. Then stick it in a bowl and cover it with some water. So what we're looking to do here is have the paper break down into just kind of floating fibers, resulting in this really mushy, easily broken apart texture. So for this recipe, we're gonna want 1 1/4 cups worth of this stuff. Squeeze out the water so it's not dripping wet, but you don't wanna squeeze out so much that it's dry when you try to break it apart. When I got down to the end, I used a strainer just to get whatever residual was floating around, which actually turned out to be a good amount still. Once I had my 1 1/4 cups, I took it and put it back in my bowl, and then broke it apart so it'd be easier to mix later. For my next ingredient, I'm using this pre-mixed joint compound that I got from Home Depot. So the directions say that any joint compound would work except for DAP. There's something they put inside of their formula that makes it so it doesn't work for this application. We're gonna be needing 1 cup of this, which we'll add to our toilet paper mix. And I immediately broke my measuring cup. So I specifically bought those because I got a conversation with my wife. She's like, you need to stop using this stuff downstairs. You're gonna break it. I'm like, I'm not gonna break it, relax. First thing I do with these new ones, break them. I can feel the I told you so, just right here, like a breath on my neck. For the next ingredients in this little mix, I used some Elmer's glue, specifically the Glue All one. This is because it is a PVA glue, and that's the kind you want for this type of process. And the measurement on that is gonna be 3/4 of a cup. Now, no nasty cake batter is complete without a little bit of flour. This, we're gonna add 1/2 cup to a cup, depending on the consistency you're looking for. We're more using this as a drying agent, so the more you add to it, the more kind of crumbly, clayey it's gonna be and a little bit less smooth. Finally, I busted out some mineral oil and added 2 tablespoons worth of that. My understanding is the mineral oil is optional and just kind of helps everything stay a little bit more smooth and increase the work time a little bit. With all the ingredients together, I start mixing it up with a spoon. I'm pretty sure you could just mix it this way, but just to give myself a smoother combination, I busted out this little electric hand mixer and whipped it up until it had this sticky mashed potato-like consistency. And what I love most about this technique is it's usable right away. So I just filled my mask with a towel to give it a little bit of extra support, and put a big old scoop of that batter on the mask and started to spread it out. Now to start with, I was just going for coverage, really trying to make sure I had enough material and that I spread it out as evenly as possible. Once I had everything covered, I then went back in with wet fingers and started really shaping in some of the detail. And I was pleasantly surprised how easy this stuff was to work with. Like using just my wet thumb, I was able to shape out the nose and the shape of the eyes, the little lumps in the cheeks here. Really everything was done just with my wet thumbs. Not only that, but I was able to get pretty fairly smooth with this technique as well. Heck, I was even able to go back in and tool in little cuts and cracks and breaks just like in the pictures. This, however, is where the waiting is gonna start, no matter which technique you use. It took this bad boy a full 24 hours to dry right next to my heater. In just regular room temperature, I would suggest you leaving it for about 48 hours just to make sure everything fully cures. The finished result, though, is a really hard shell over this cardboard armature that honestly looked awesome. Like, it has really nice weight, and it is hard. It's actually really, really hard. I enjoy this stuff greatly. It was really easy to work with and shape. So now that we have the basic mask pretty much there, we can move on to finishing touches. All right, as much fun as it was to work with the kind of clay-like consistency and shape it how I wanted to, the portion now where we get to actually make this look like the Huntress's mask is just my favorite. To start with, I went in with some sandpaper and just tried to smooth everything out as much as I could. And thankfully, this stuff actually sands really well. Now, because the mask on the game is actually still pretty rough, I didn't sand it down too smooth just to make sure it still had some of this roughness, like it's been through hell and back. But if you really wanted to go the extra mile and make your masks like extra smooth or whatever, you could put another layer of just the joint compound on, let that dry and fill in all the cracks, and then sand it again. That'll give you a much smoother finish. Now you may notice that I left the inside of the mask the raw cardboard. This is more of like a time/laziness thing. I had more of this material, I could have added it to the back. It would have been another 24 hours to dry. And I release an episode for you every week. I don't have that kind of time. So I opted to hide it by just painting it a flat black inside. And honestly, I'm okay with it. It came out pretty cool just like that. As for the outside, I used a black primer to paint that as well. I learned this from one of you in the comments section way back in the day, that by having a black base, it's gonna make the aging of things a lot easier. You're gonna see as we go, it really works well. Not only that, but the mask kinda looks dope in black. I'm getting a real Donnie Darko vibe, and I kinda dig it. So once that's dry, I go ahead and start adding in a layer of white acrylic paint. I put this on super lightly. The brush is relatively dry, and I spread a little bit over as much area as possible. Doing this helps add to the look that the white is starting to fade away over time, and you can still see kind of streaks of that black coming through, and adds a lot of depth to the whole piece. Then by adding just a little bit of extra paint to the cheeks and the nose and the forehead, I can make those areas seem like they're standing out more, where everything else kind of recedes into the back, just giving it more of a three-dimensional look. Next, I go in with a mostly dry brush of black all around the eyes. This helps those sink in a little bit more and matches the character art. I noticed also in the character art that she has kind of this eyeliner around them, making the eyes themselves more sharp and better defined. For the eyebrows, I just used a brown marker and colored those in. Nothing fancy, but honestly, it came out pretty good. All right, finally, for like the kind of pink areas, I really wanted to make sure that was a very, very worn out looking color. So I added just a little bit of red paint to some white, and then again, applied that with a mostly dry brush. Once the ears were done, I also did the nose, and then very, very lightly put a blush on the cheeks. And at this point, it is looking like a creepy old Halloween mask already. Like, maybe it hasn't done much killing in its day, but it's definitely creepy. Now, to give it a little bit of extra age and make it look more like our killer's mask, I got to do something to it that I've always wanted to do to the Huntress. I attacked it with an axe. That's right. Who's laughing now, Miss Throw an Axe from across the map and somehow hit me on a generator? How do you people do that, by the way? Terrible. Once I was happy with the layout of all those scratches, I went back in with some sandpaper just to reveal a little bit more of the black underneath the white. And that by itself gave it way more aging. Like anywhere we had a hard edge or whatever, just rubbing the sandpaper over it let some of that black show through and made it look like this mask has really been through it. Now to push the whole look over the top and really make it our killer's mask, I grabbed a brush and started splattering some red paint onto it, mirroring that blood splatter she gets from just hacking me to pieces with an axe. Now, that is the Huntress's mask. Check that out! I was seriously geeking out over it. I'm like taking pictures of it and sending to my friends. I was really proud of how that came out. Now, because it is a mask and I do want it to function as one, I want it to be able to be worn, I punched some holes in the side and then fished some black ribbon through. Now, though I could probably just tie knots in the ribbon to keep it in place and call it a day, I was worried that this is just made out of cardboard, so I decided to leave the tail kind of long inside of here and hot glue them into place. This just gives a lot more surface area for it to pull against, so it's not all pulling against just this thin edge here. Finally, the character in the game has a veil connected to her mask, so I picked up this fancy piece of material and just super glued it onto the back. And there you have it! Phone the entity, tell them that you're ready to kick some generators and hook some survivors. Looking at you, Meg. You're going down. I honestly can't be happier with how this came out. For my first attempt at like paper mache anything, and it being this particular technique, it's super simple to do. You should definitely give it a try on your next project. It's really cool to do. And look at it. That is awesome. I'm so happy with how this came out. All right, that's my project. Before I do my final wrap-ups, though, I have some people I'd like to shout out. First and foremost, Skill Monkey Sean Chick of Sean Chick Leathers sent me some of this leather balm that he makes. He just started selling it, and this isn't like a paid promotion or anything. I just kind of likes to support when you guys do stuff, and he did a great job on this. It's all natural, fully organic and all that, and it helps keep your leather flexible and from cracking, and it smells really good to boot. But I used it on some of my leather, and it works really, really well. He was nice enough to give us a 5% discount on these in case you wanted to try it. I put the link to his site below, as well as the discount code if you wanted to give it a go. I also wanted to shout out Skill Monkey Ryan Does Stuff over on the Discord for sending me his book. He wrote this under the name R.W. Greystone, by the way, not Ryan Does Stuff. That's just his screen name. So as I said, I like to support you guys, so I went ahead and bought this on Kindle as soon as I found out it came out, and he was nice enough to send me a copy of it too. And he is really good. It's a really good book. I've linked to that down below as well. Definitely go check it out and support your fellow Skill Monkeys in this community if you're looking for a good read. Speaking of support, I want to thank my Patreon members for supporting me here. Honestly, I couldn't keep doing this stuff that I like doing here if it wasn't for your help. Every one of you, keep the lights on here, and I couldn't appreciate it more, so thank you. If any of you would like to support what I do here, link to the Patreon in the description below. Finally, as always, if there's something you'd like to see me cover, leave it in the comments below, and I will add it to the list. Alright, well I should get going. They must have the generators mostly done by now, and I have a job to do. In the meantime, keep leveling up, you.